All right, so good afternoon or almost good evening, everybody. I'll go and kick off the public meeting event for the joint Tri-Cities and Richmond MPOs TMA certification review. So with that said, I'll go ahead and introduce myself. Actually, I'll start with the federal team, review team. Go ahead and introduce yourselves. My name is Richard Duran. I'm the community planner for the Federal Highway Administration Virginia Division Office, and I'm the one who's taking the lead in conducting the TMA certification review for both Tri-Cities and Richmond MPOs.
Hi, good evening. I am Ryan Long. I am a community planner with the Federal Transit Administration and the Region 3 office located in Philadelphia. Responsibilities of planning in Virginia and Maryland. I'm assisting Richard on the planning certification review of the Tri-Cities MPO and the Richmond TPO. I'm looking forward to hearing comments from the public tonight regarding the MPO's planning process, and that's it.
And then could I have the MPOs introduce themselves, and then we can have the state partners follow afterwards.
My name is Chad Parsons. I'm Director of Transportation for Plan RVA, and we serve as the organization that hosts the Richmond Regional Transportation Planning Organization.
And I'm Ron Swakowski. I'm the MPO Director for the Tri-Cities Area MPO. We're Colonial Heights, Petersburg, Hopewell, and the surrounding counties.
I'm Phil Riggin with Plan RVA.
Good afternoon. This is Alec Brebner, Executive Director at Crater Planning District Commission, which houses the Tri-Cities Area MPO.
Good afternoon. I'm Martha Heater, Executive Director of Plan RVA, which houses the Richmond Regional Richmond Regional Transportation Planning Organization.
Okay, I take it we're moving to the DOT now. My name is Marsha Fion, the Division Administrator for the Transportation and Mobility Planning Division in Central Office in Virginia, Richmond, and we're partners with the district offices.
And good afternoon, everybody. I'm Liz McAdory. I work for VDOT at the Richmond District Planning Office. We are the main liaisons to both of the MPOs, and I'm glad to be here this afternoon.
And this is Mark Riblett, Assistant District Engineer for Richmond District. Glad to be here as well.
Good afternoon. I'm Sandra Norman. I'm the Division Administrator for Civil Rights for Central Office, or the Civil Rights for VDOT. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Farrell Solomon. I am the Richmond District Civil Rights Manager for VDOT.
Good afternoon. I'm Corina Herrera with Civil Rights. I'm the Title VI specialist.
All right, thank you, everybody. So before we kick off for the public comment period, I'm going to do a quick presentation on kind of giving the public a background on what a transportation management area certification review is, and what it usually entails when we conduct these with the metropolitan planning organizations in key cities across the country. Okay, so I'd like to introduce the federal team a little bit more thoroughly. So out of FTA, the Federal Transit Administration, we have Ryan Long. He covers Region 3 in the United States, and that covers mostly the majority of the Mid-Atlantic, ranging from as far south as Virginia, going all the way up to Pennsylvania and New Jersey. Out of the Federal Highway Administration, we're the Virginia Division Office, and we're located in Richmond, Virginia. And the participants that helped out on this team is Ronique Bishop, myself, Richard Duran, Ivan Rucker, and Mary Walker. So the question you asked is like, why are we here? So every 4 years, the FTA and Federal Highway, we jointly review the metropolitan transportation planning process for cities or areas with over 200,000 population. And part of this review is we seek public input and see what comments and what suggestions, and we basically just want to hear what the public has to say and what their thoughts are on how the planning process is working. So through tonight's session, your comments that are received today and also by mail and the following days. So we'll have an open period within the next 60 days to receive any comments that you might have. And whatever comments we do have, we'll summarize it in the report, and it'll help the federal team write and draft our final report and findings for Tri-Cities and for Richmond MPOs. All comments are taken into consideration while evaluating the transportation planning completed for the area. And if you're unaware to send your comments for the Richmond MPO, you can send the following comments to RRTPO input@planrva.org. And for the Tri-Cities MPO, you can email your comments to the director of the Tri-Cities MPO. We greatly appreciate your comments, and all comments will be taken into consideration when developing the final report. And any comments that are submitted to the MPOs will be forwarded to the Federal Highway and FTA by Richmond and Tri-Cities MPOs. So once we receive all the, so the next part of this period is, so yesterday we had the two insight certification reviews where we kind of had a all-day discussion and overview of the planning process for each MPO. So after this week and after the public meeting tonight, we'll kind of have like a 60-day period where we'll be putting together all of our notes, all of our findings, and we'll be putting this all together in the final report. And this final report will actually be shared with the public by the MPOs at the very end. But to kind of give you a rundown of what the process is that the Metropolitan Planning Organization will be certified, and the certification will be subject to corrective actions if we do find anything that the MPO needs help with in addressing and strengthening their planning process. And certification is used for only certain construction funding categories. So if you're wondering what the planning process is, it's a process by which the transportation decisions are made and projects are planned, selected, and prioritized for implementation within the region. And the reason why the planning process is important is it decides how a substantial share of federal funding is spent nationwide. And because of limited funding, the MPO must prioritize the regional needs and determine the best and most economical solution. And also the planning process lays the framework for the future of transportation systems within the region. So the parties involved in the planning process are the MPOs, and the MPOs made up by the Policy Committee, Technical Committee, and in some cases, the Citizens Committee. It is also made up by the State Department of Transportation. So in this case, it's the Virginia Department of Transportation, the various public transportation operators, local jurisdictions that include cities, counties, local citizens like yourselves tonight, interest groups, as well as FTA and FHWA. So how is the planning? How does the planning process work? So so the terminology that we use is called the 3C approach. And the 3C approach, that stands for continuing, cooperative, and comprehensive. And those are the three key approaches that we have that helps really define and develop the planning process for the MPOs, not only for the MPOs, but for the state and for nationwide. We also consider multimodal planning processes too. So not only just highway transportation, but we also look at bike ped, so bike and pedestrian, freight, transit, to name a few. And also what's most important is what really helps develop the planning process is the public input that we receive. So the main products of the planning process that's developed to help the planning process is the Unified Planning Work Program, the Long Range Transportation Plan, the Congestion Management Process, the Transportation Improvement Program, as well as the Public Participation Plan. So I'll go over each of these plans to kind of give you a quick brief overview of what they are. So the Unified Planning Work Program is a mechanism document describing the planning activities to be completed and its costs. It covers the MPO budget and is basically a plan for the planning. A long-range transportation plan is a 20-year multimodal guide to regional needs and potential solutions. It demonstrates the financially feasibility, conforms to clean air standards, as well as contains financial plans, local goals and objectives, and public involvement. The congestion management process is a short-term and long-term strategy. Short-term wise, it looks at current traffic and transit problems and it tries to solve. For long-term, it tries to prevent problems from occurring. The Transportation Improvement Program is a 4-year list of financially feasible projects, as well as a document prioritizing regional projects for funding and implementation. If the region has air quality issues, this mix of projects must be within given emission limits. So you wonder, how did the products all fit together? This is kind of a quick, little brief diagram of demonstrating it. So you have the Unified Planning Work Program, which helps update the transportation plan. It also helps develop the Transportation Improvement Program. So an example is Corridor XYZ is a major investment study. So I'll start from the top, kind of go from the top, going sideways and going down. So for the Unified Planning Work Program, it updates the transportation plan. During that middle period, we include the public involvement to get comments and suggestions. And lead into the transportation plan, this transportation plan develops a 20-year list of projects or corridor improvements. This then leads into a 3-year list of priorities chosen from the plan. And this is usually developed inside the Transportation Improvement Program. If you go down to the second level, the Unified Work Program helps develop the Transportation Improvement Program by utilizing the financial revenues and cost projections in the transportation plan. And then that leads into the TIP, which helps develop the 3-year list of priorities chosen from the plan and also determines the air quality. And if you look on the very bottom line too, so an example is Corridor XYZ is a major investment study, and that's found in the UPWP, and that leads into the transportation plan air quality analysis, leading into the TIP, which is found to be financially feasible. And here's another little diagram demonstrating the process. At first, it might be a little bit confusing, but basically it kind of just shows how everything is all connected within each other. So before we start the open floor comment period, to kind of just help push the comments, some things to consider, but this is not limited to these questions, but if you're having trouble what to ask, here are some ideas of what you can ask. So you can ask these following questions, but feel free to, the floor is open. You're welcome to share your comments on how you feel the planning process is being conducted in your particular region, whether it be in the Richmond or Tri-Cities region. So the public comment period today is going to go from, so the whole period is from 4 to 7, but once I get done with this presentation, we'll hand it off to the floor and we'll conclude at 7 p.m. But just to mention that we are here to receive your comments on the regional transportation planning process, both verbal and written. All opinions and points of view are valid. Please respect the opinions and comments of those who may differ with you. In case if we have guests who share their comments via Zoom or live chat. This session will end at 7 p.m. But don't feel restricted that you have to get everything in by that time period. If the meeting does end and you didn't get a chance to submit your comments, please feel free to submit your comments afterwards. I'll post up the point of contacts again and the email addresses for if you'd like to submit your comments via email. Well, actually, since this will be a kind of interesting venue, since this is not an in-person public event, when you are given the floor or if you're given the virtual floor through Zoom, feel free to state your name for the record and then and proceed to share your comment. We'll try to give you as much time as you need to share your comments, and we'll give you a notice when on how much time you have left or how long your period has been going. So here's the information again. I'll scroll back to this page for everyone to see, and feel free to ask too in the chat room too if you have any need the addresses again. We'd be happy to share those with you. And also, if you want to contact us directly at Federal Highway, here's our contact information as well.
Hey, Richard, this is Chad. Can I add one more point?
Yeah, I was going to say if the MPOs or even the state DOT, if you have any items to add, feel free to add them. But go ahead, Chad.
Sure, thanks. Just one other housekeeping item. It looks like there are at least 2 folks that have joined us by phone. So we typically ask during the Zoom calls if they could please introduce themselves since we won't have a face with or a name listed. That's usually good for the record keeping.
Chet, it's Lisa Guthrie with the Virginia Transit Association and also representing New Kent County on the CTAC. I'm present.
Thank you, Lisa.
Okay, so if the state partners and the MPOs are ready to go, we'll go ahead and open the floor for the public.
Chet, I don't hear anybody else, so I'm going to go ahead and speak if that's okay. It's Lisa, again, it's Lisa Guthrie with the Virginia Transit Association and also a representative on the CTAC. And even though that we don't seem to have much participation on the Zoom today, I do not view that as any indicator of lack of interest. I think there is interest. I think it's just difficult under the COVID circumstances and communications that are strained now that we don't have people on the call. But I do think that the TPO has done an extraordinary effort of increasing their public outreach and citizen engagement. And I hope we continue to move in that direction and continue to make connections with those who are underserved, underrepresented, and interested in more multimodal transportation than just single occupancy vehicles. So I think we are moving in the right direction. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. For those folks on the phone line, I can read out some, to help with the discussion, I can read out some of the questions to see if maybe it might help with any of the public who might have comments, but not sure what to ask. So the first question is, for the public, do you have an adequate opportunity to participate in the MPO transportation planning process for both Richmond MPOs and Tri-Cities MPOs? Another question could be, I'm actually curious about with public involvement is, from the public perspective, have you been involved in the MPO transportation planning process before? Have you ever had the opportunity to offer comments and attend public meetings with Richmond or Tri-Cities?
Good afternoon. This is Mike Sawyer. In order to add value to our time here, I wasn't going to comment, but I think I will. I've had pretty wide participation in both the TPO and the different meetings that take place with the city of Richmond. Heavily involved in those and really appreciate the expertise at the regional level. And I look forward to, in particular, the Vision Zero action plan and moving that forward as the Vision Zero coordinator for the city of Richmond. One aspect of the planning process that is relatively new, and there's a lot of work at the Transportation Research Board, is the question of health and transportation. And I would like to see the process shaped a little bit better so that it's not just injury prevention that you would find in Vision Zero, but you would also find focus on the chronic diseases and how our built environment addresses asthma and heart disease and cancer and some of the more chronic diseases through the built environment, and having a process in place which engages the local health department. I know at the state level, there's a large movement now to work between the Department of Transportation and the Virginia Health Department. And it takes place at the local level between Richmond and the Richmond Community Health Department. And kind of the review that takes place on a project by project basis is important to have the voice of the health professional saying that this cross section, this typical section, while it may be a little bit wider and it doesn't minimize the right-of-way impacts, it has a huge impact on providing space for all users in a complete streets model, what I would also call a healthy streets model. So I would just offer those comments from a multimodal perspective that we need to be in the business of health promotion with our transportation system versus just the injury prevention side. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sawyer. Appreciate your comment.
Richard, this is Chet. In the interest of utilizing the platform to its fullest capabilities, I'd also encourage folks that are joining us, if they don't want to speak up, they can always enter something in the chat. We can raise points that way too, if that's okay with you.
Yeah. Feel free to share your comments via chat. And for those folks on our chat, I was going to ask for the folks who are viewing this on YouTube live streaming, do they have the capability of submitting a comment below?
I believe so. I believe Phil is with us from our staff. And Phil, if you can check on that and see if that's enabled, we can report back to you in just a few minutes, Richard.
Okay.
Hello, I'm Vaughn Tisdale from Ride Finders, the Executive Director of Ride Finders. And I'd just like to say that Ride Finders serves as a non-voting member of the RRTPO Policy Board. We also serve a representative on the TAC committee for the RRTPO, and also for the Tri-Cities area. Very active in participating in the meetings, and we do appreciate the process. It's a very inclusive group who does seek to gather the input, particularly from our organization. They share information of recent research studies, projects that are going on in the area. And I do notice that they do solicit at the meetings, are there any topics that any of the members would like to bring before the group? So I do appreciate the work they do. They do get a report from us on an annual basis and anytime during the meetings on the monthly basis. So just want to share that information that they are inclusive. I have noticed difference in their marketing and social media outreach to be more inclusive and bring more people into the meeting. So just want to point that out. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Tisdale. I'd just like to follow on to that comment if I can. We, as Richard mentioned earlier, we had a site visit, I guess on Tuesday for the Richmond TPO, and then Wednesday for Tri-Cities MPO. And we heard not quite a bit, but we heard often that Ride Finders was the information that they provided to the MPOs is very valuable in terms of new markets being served for transit, van pools, car pools, additional transit services. So I just wanted to add that it did seem like, at least from my perspective, in the review that we heard, the federal team had heard that that service, Ride Finders, was a good service and is one in which MPOs really valued. And I think it sounds like a good sharing maybe of information as well between the agencies on various, let's say maybe in various planning documents and processes. So it's good. Thank you.
Absolutely. We enjoy the working relationship, and we do have a member who serves on our advisory board as well. And that has probably always been the case. And we do exchange information. We learn, but we also play, I think, a very vital role in being a part of the transportation community and industry. And we appreciate that support as well.
And I'm sorry, keep going. Seems we have enough time. So,
really?
Yeah, no, Vaughn, this is great. So the Ride Finders, I mean, plug ride finders, but so ride finders provides different services for both the areas served by both MPOs and metropolitan planning organizations, right? So in the whole Richmond urbanized area, correct?
Yes, indeed.
Thank you.
So for those who are, if there's any of those who just joined us this evening, we're having an open floor discussion for the public. What you can see on the screen right now is just some general questions that you can ask if you're not sure what to ask the Richmond MPO as well as the Tri-Cities MPOs. But the purpose of this public meeting is to kind of get comments from the public on how they're seeing the planning process is working for them in their region.
Hi, this is Louise Lockett-Gordon, if I might offer a comment. I do participate with the Richmond Region TPO on the LRTP Advisory Committee. And part of my comment is just that the organization has made some strides to be more open and inclusive in who participates in the planning process. So just want to say kudos for that. The second piece of my comment is that I did notice there were some groups that are invited and included at the beginning of our process that are not usually transportation focused. And I seem to have observed that their participation has waned over some months. So it's more of an observation and to take note that if that happens, there might be some additional follow-up that the organization might want to do in order to understand why that's happening. There might be some additional follow-up with those groups that don't typically engage in transportation related work. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for everyone's comments so far. For those who are just joining us this evening, feel free to raise your hand in the Zoom chat if you're in Zoom. Feel free to also share a comment in the chat if you do not wish to speak in the Zoom video. And also we are live on YouTube, so you're welcome to share your chats in the comment chat room there too.
Richard, this is Chad again. We did check and the comments are open on YouTube. And we'll make sure that we'll do our best to make sure that that stays open for a period after this is recorded, so that if people come back and view it later, they can leave comments at their leisure.
Okay, thank you, Chet. Thank you for bringing that up. And with that said too, I like to remind too, I failed to mention this too, but if you have no comments tonight, but say later on in the next few days, you do have something that comes to mind, feel free to share those with the MPOs. I'll scroll down to so you can send your comments for Richmond. You can send your comments to the following link, and then for Tri-Cities, there's this link also that you can send them to. And the comment period will be open for 60 days after today. And whatever comments that we do collect, we'll utilize them and use them in helping develop the final draft of the TMA certification review for both for each Richmond and also for Tri-Cities MPO. So for those of you who just joined us on Zoom, feel free to speak up and share any comments you might have for Richmond or Tri-Cities MPOs. And for those folks who are viewing us live streaming on YouTube, feel free to share your comments in the comment chat. We also have the point of contact emails for each MPO in the case you wish to share your comments via email.
So good evening. This is Patricia Page from New Kent County. I heard the comments earlier about other agencies being a part of this. My comments are that not only other agencies, but my passion is for our rural localities, our smaller localities, even though our transportation needs may not be as great or as demanding. But I would ask that if we're talking about future planning, that it would not be lost in the potential for growth in the surrounding area and the surrounding Richmond metropolitan area, as each of our rural localities surely have increased in population. And so that would be my desire, that it would be absolutely visionary of the potential for growth and the potential needs of from the Tri-Cities and the Richmond MPO.
Thank you, Ms. Page. Appreciate your comment.
Yes, thank you. Is there any particular, you said you identify needs, Ms. Page, is there any other, any needs in particular, just, in terms of transportation?
Well, when we talk about, if we talk about transit, we talk about connectivity. How would our localities, even if we do have a independent transit system, other than Greater Richmond Transit, then the connectivity of that, how would we, at what point would we connect? I mean, we have the share ride parking facilities, but to get one of our smaller buses to a area where we could then get our residents to GRTC to go into the city, then we have to think about, I think as the county grows, we need to think about those needs, particularly in New Kent County. Even though we are a growing county, we are an aging county. And so I think that that needs to be something that we put great consideration in. When we talk about other modes of transportation, we look at the effect of that major and increased interstate traffic causes to our secondary roads. One in particular is we have a secondary road where we have trucks that are carrying 90,000 versus 60,000 on the interstate, that kind of weight, and how that weight affects our secondary roads. So I think all of that has to be included. And then it becomes for any, not only rural localities, I drive some of the streets of Richmond, but in other localities, I see the need for improved infrastructure. So what is the plan other than when there is an ask for maintenance that the money has been distributed for snow and ice, or, where is that dedicated line that is truly a commitment to our localities?
Thank you. Yes, thank you. Just have a question. Have you, these are really good points you bring up. Have you addressed either the MPOs about these concerns, or been involved in public meetings with the MPOs regarding some of the concerns you addressed here?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I mean, we have even as far as our Board of Supervisors, I'm talking to state legislation, especially about the weight of the logging trucks and the trucks they use are secondary roads. I'm trying to get that scale, trying to get that changed. I mean, why would you have more weight coming down a secondary road than you would a major interstate? Yeah, I mean, we got a one lane road here. The interstate at least has a 2, possibly 3-lane road, but you're bringing a tractor trailer with trees and overhang and driveways leading out into the major road or that road. You know, it's just ingredients for major accidents. And I do have an upcoming meeting with our Board of Supervisors with Secretary Valentine, and that is one of the issues that will be coming up again.
Thank you.
For those who have just joined us in Zoom or on live streaming on YouTube, again, this is the Richmond MPO and Tri-Cities MPO public meeting comment period. So feel free to jump in and share any comments that you might have. Feel free to unmute yourself in Zoom. If you prefer to type it in the chat, feel free to type your comment in the chat. And for those on YouTube, we have a chat window open for those who want to share their comments via YouTube. If later on you don't have a comment right now, but later on if you do have comments that come up to mind, feel free to send your comments to the following point of contact email for Richmond and for Tri-Cities.
It's mighty quiet on this call. This is Stuart Schwartz from the Partnership for Smarter Growth.
Hi, Mr. Schwartz.
Hey, I do not serve on the Citizen Advisory Committee here. I've been much more involved with the one in the DC area over time. I know you may have some people contact you or who are already on here who do that. I don't know how effective and listen to it is, but I think that's always an important thing to look at when you do your certifications is whether the diverse input that you can get from a citizen advisory committee is seen as having an important role in the development of the plans, in influencing the decision makers and so forth. And I'll just make that as sort of a general comment. Again, I don't know how this one has been performing, but I think they are extremely valuable. They're often removed a little bit from the politics. They may have stakeholder interest, but they're not necessarily in the political hot seat like the elected officials on a TPO. So they can come up with great ideas, and I'd be interested to know how often those ideas might be adopted or have some influence in shaping the planning processes.
Great, thank you, Mr. Schwartz. Appreciate that comment.
I guess maybe to answer your question.
Yeah, sorry.
The Richmond TPO has a Citizens Advisory Committee, Community Advisory Committee, like the name has changed. It's very active. And it's very valuable. It's input, like as you mentioned, to some of that decision-making process. Usually different perspective from, the transportation professionals that work on this every day. Sometimes they see things differently. Their eyes on this, eyes on the street, so to speak. So if Chet wanted to plug your it'd be a good time to maybe make a plug for that,
Sure. Yeah. I mean, thanks for the opportunity, Ryan. Yes, Mr. Schwartz, we do have a community transportation advisory committee, and over the past 2 years since I've been here, we've started assessing the function of it and how it can best operate to serve as an advisory role to our elected officials. When I joined Plan RVA, there were a number of different subcommittees of the CTAC, and those subcommittees have been absorbed. So we retain some of the members. Our goal in the last year and a half has been to encourage as much active participation as possible and identify other stakeholders in the community that could join. So that was kind of the boring work of looking at bylaws and membership roles and trying to make that as flexible as possible so that we could encourage more folks to join and be part of the process. One of the things I am excited about is that we have, at least on our initial swipe, we've been able to incorporate the CTAC more into the overall MPO process. So our CTAC chair provides a report at our monthly policy board meetings. They do provide advice back and comments back to the elected officials for certain documents. There is interaction between our technical committee, our CTAC, and our elected officials. One of the things that we focused on during COVID is to use the virtual platforms as an educational tool. So our CTAC has been hosting 2 to 3 speakers each meeting. They meet bi-monthly. So we've taken the opportunity of everybody being in their living room to learn as a group about some of the different things that are going on around the region, whether it's the Richmond Marine Terminal or electric vehicles or some of the initiatives that are taking place in the broader Richmond area. And I think I'll stop talking in a second. The thing I want to emphasize is that we're still trying to figure out the best use for the CTAC and what I think from an advisory role to the elected officials, and as well as what the community is excited about and where we can generate some more energy around regional planning. So I think we're trying to expand our educational chops all the way around the office, and the CTAC is a great leader in that regard, and one that we hope to expand in the future. Hopefully that was helpful.
Very much so. I recommend to the extent you can, especially if you can get them for free, having, outside experts come in, because especially in this era of Zoom, being able to do that, you can bring outside experts into the region to share some best practices. That would be helpful.
Absolutely.
One other thing I think I can think of 2 other things that are relevant that from looking at NPOs and the challenges is, to the extent that you fully make clear in the process how important the local process is in feeding into, things like Connect RVA, your plans. It's a regional body, but obviously very still, locally based in terms of preferences for projects and things like that. And often it's, can be too late to engage in the process, once it's at the TPO, and that having the public better understand through whatever you put on the website, you may already have this that maps out, hey, you need to be talking to your local supervisors back here a year prior or 2 years prior, even, if you want to help shape the next plan or priorities, that sort of thing. So that would be one thing. And then something else, for the federal officials and in terms of And again, because I haven't been involved day to day, this may be being done. You're looking at equity issues, I know, and your federal legal requirements on that. You know, how are we looking at certain metrics like accessibility to jobs for minority and low income populations via roads, via transit? I think we are, but I think that's definitely always something important to do.
Yes, I'm sorry. Yes, I was on mute. Yes, thank you. That is it was a topic discussion yesterday. Yes, we did ask that question to the MPO regarding kind of the measures they use to, let's say, select prioritized projects that go onto the long range plans or short term programs, and there were a number of EJ, environmental justice, and equity factors that they use. So it was good to hear. And you're right, there are federal requirements along those lines to identify we call it environmental justice, say populations, and to account for that for where you decisions that you make, where you place projects, but also where the needs are too. Maybe underserved communities where maybe there's a gap or a need that's not being addressed. So yeah, that is certainly a big part of what the MPO does, and that's something we looked at over the last 2 days. We asked questions about stuff. So, Richard, myself. Thank you. That's a good comment. Looks like Ron was about to. Ron, did you want to add it? You popped in. I didn't. Do you want to add anything? Looks like you might be on mute. Still on mute. Okay, I guess not.
For those folks who are just joining us tonight, we're right now is the public comment period. So feel free to unmute yourselves and share any comments that you might have with Richmond MPO and Tri-Cities MPO. And for those on the phone, feel free to unmute yourselves and jump in and share any comments you might have too. And for those folks who are viewing this on YouTube, feel free to share your comments in the chat box on the side. And if you're watching this at a later time, on displayed are the point of contacts to submit your comments if you have any comments that you wish to email later on.
Well, this is Stuart again. I'm not shy. I think I'll posit something, especially with a new federal administration. Do you foresee, and I don't know to the extent you have the authority at this point on a regulatory side, efforts to not only ensure that CO2 is being measured in regional transportation planning, but that measures are being taken to reduce regional CO2 from the transportation sector?
See, for that, I think that's still kind of ongoing in development. how we're going to, what tools we're going to use for that. Ryan, would you be able to speak better on that?
I know the MPO is required to with air quality conformity, EPA requirements, and all their documents. And so that's a process to look at several pollutants, whether or not the projects in there go above and beyond, say, the levels that are kind of prescribed by the state. But I don't believe that, I guess you're that particular, I guess you're looking at a particular carbon monoxide. Sorry, what's that? Yeah, I don't think that's quite there yet on the federal level. Yeah, so, but yeah, I know it's always something that's been in discussions, I think, you know, to add that additional layer. But as far as but right now, no, I understand it. Yeah.
Are you talking about carbon dioxide when it comes to the climate change and such? Is that what you're referring to? Because CO, I was involved in an MPO that did CO monitoring, and we had to meet requirements. I suspect that you're talking about climate change and CO2,
Yeah, that's what I said.
water vapor, and those type of things. I think we're still very early in that. Like, I agree with Ryan. I think it's definitely steering into that overall for states and MPOs and such, but I don't know where we're at, you know, exactly where we're at. I imagine, like you said, the new administration may provide a lot more guidance on that. It'll eventually filter down to the federal agencies and the states and the MPOs. At this point, I think we're just trying to think that way, but not necessarily have a requirement that way. And I'm seeing some of the larger MPOs. I think Washington, DC, in fact, their MPO director, we have a monthly meeting of MPO directors, and there is a lot of discussion right now with their long range plan as to how to address that very issue and make that part of their long range plan. Even if it's not required, it's still something that they would like to do.
Yes, in fact, I think there was an overwhelming vote to accelerate the next update to the long range plan. They'll proceed with this one right now, but they will do the next one within just 2 years, not 4 years, with the goal of reducing CO2 and greenhouse gas emissions from the transportation plan and the sector. And there's been a lot of discussion too that, you know, since electric vehicles will not be enough, even with rapid adoption, and they could be adopted more slowly than many people expect, they were looking at reduction in vehicle miles traveled as well.
I'm glad that they took that approach, because at least from what she was sharing with our folks, from a timetable standpoint, to try to put it now in the existing planning process would cause the plan to expire, which would then create a whole slew of other problems. So I'm glad that you all are taking that course.
Yeah, they did that. I mean, but honestly, it's, you know, given the knowledge about climate change, I know there was no regulatory requirement. It would have been ideal if 2 years ago for this plan, we had started it, you know, and especially now the scientists are saying we've got by 2030, we've got to reduce emissions by 50% below 2005 levels. So there is some urgency to this. And I know your processes in each region start pretty early, especially when you're starting to look at the financial picture and project priorities. And so, you know, it would be great if this MPO, we're about to adopt a plan here. Hopefully we can still shape it some more to be, you know, more sustainable, but then quickly go into a similar thing where you do another update on an accelerated basis in 2 years rather than 4.
Stuart, in the case of both our MPOs, Richmond is in their draft stage right now and will be approving theirs in October. Ours will be approved in June. So I think we can, you know, particularly if there's some more guidance between now and then, you know, after both our plans are approved, we can start right away with that. Whether, you know, particularly, you know, whether it's required or not, we can at least start with that, engaging that process. I don't know, Chad, if you want to join anything with that, but and we've been hearing the same thing from Washington, DC with, you know, they've been wanting to, but they're just running out of time. We're on a 5-year cycle for both of us. I think Washington, I don't know if they're on a 5-year cycle or not, but like you said, Stuart, they're going to start on a quicker cycle for the next round.
I guess I will add, even in the absence of maybe, federal requirements. Yeah, I know other MPOs that have, I think Ronnie mentioned that, address climate change in their planning documents. Even maybe adding a factor that, in terms of the selection process that, would, certainly wouldn't harm the environment, but would certainly, or even benefit and, address climate change. So, I mean, even with the absence of the federal maybe requirements there, I know that MPOs and other regions have, they certainly have that as a priority goal, of one of their long range planning. So, and I know that one of our planning factors is, resiliency, of course, how do you address resiliency, looking on the long term, building obviously facilities and transportation facilities that can maybe weather some, future disasters or emergencies. But it's also, looking at ways to maybe negate some of those adverse effects too. So, yeah, like I think you're right, Ron. I think we're getting there. But maybe not directly, maybe indirectly. That's a good question. Thank you.
Yeah, I guess this is Chad. I'll just add one other thought. We focused hard with this planning cycle to look at data-driven metrics, which we haven't done before in terms of project evaluation. And a lot of that was geared around equity and accessibility. So we did most of the work, the new work that we did for this long range plan was geared around that and being able to evaluate projects and prioritize projects based on how they actually are expected to perform. We do know that climate change is a major issue. I mean, we follow the Tidewater closely in terms of the efforts that they're making. And my hope is that immediately after this plan is in place, we can start a scenario planning process where we aren't just looking at straight up transportation issues. It's all different types of issues and how they relate and impact the transportation system, whether that's housing or environment or specific climate change issues. All the different things. And a big part of that, at least in Central Virginia, is education. So climate change is a political term in a lot of households, and it's something that I think we need to have a common understanding of before we can start thinking about policies and programs, at least from where I sit. So I'm looking forward to taking an extended time to develop a process to really have a community conversation about it, and how our transportation decisions are impacted by lots more than just transportation.
Right, housing in the right locations is a transportation solution.
Mr. Schwartz, in the chat, I'm going to send a couple of links. These are regularly updated. One's a general air quality resource link that kind of just gives a general up-to-date status on what policy guidance is coming out. Typically how that works is like, say if with the new administration, if they're pushing, since they're pushing heavily towards working on climate change items, that announcement is made both with the agencies. It sometimes takes a while for them to develop the necessary policies and guidance, and then that trickles down to the field offices. And then in this case too, we're approaching the expiration of the FAST Act as well. So right now, the current transportation bill is in the House, and it's just going through the process of getting voted on, and we don't know what's in it yet, to really to say what how our guidance is going to look and what policies we're going to administer and what we're going to require the local governments to do in when they're developing their plans. But hopefully in the next month we'll find out, and then once that happens, that's when we start getting updates as they come along. Once we kind of dissect and look at the new transportation bill and see what are the new requirements, what items we'll be focusing on.
Thank you. Unfortunately, all the best requirements, new progressive things were in the House bill, which now it's being led by the Senate structure that they've come up with. So there may not be as many changes as many of us thought there might be, but we'll see. I did have a question. This would probably go to you, Richard, and FHWA. How much, and Chet as well, and Ron, what's happening in models in terms of the latest in modeling at the regional scale? You mentioned the word, Richard, accessibility, which is music to my ear. I mean, sorry, Chet did, which is a really important part of this. And you know, there are those who've been trying to do modeling that is more accessibility oriented and proximity oriented. You know, is there work being done at FHWA and teaming with the MPOs to improve the modeling in terms of accessibility and in terms of the ability to model transit, walk, bike trips?
In regards to the most recent executive orders related to equity, I believe that's still being worked out at headquarters level for Federal Highway. But before that, I know there's a lot of modeling. I'm not a model expert, so I'm not 100% sure. I would say, Chet, would you be able to answer better on that in regards to modeling? What's currently being used?
Sure, I'm not inside the box, but I can say that we due mostly to finances. We operate a traditional 4-step model. It's not activity based. We would certainly love to be able to do that at some point, but we have been, at least for this cycle, we've been able to work with a consultant to develop additional, I don't know what the right word is, pods, offshoots of the model that directly assess accessibility to jobs and destinations, and that's documented in the appendices for the draft plan. But yeah, it's pretty exciting. I mean, I think right now those components were developed as customized scripts that feed into our current model format. We do have we just got access to a new platform called Replica, which is activity-based subscription modeling, which is a little bit different. So we're investigating ways to use that to help assist in our efforts to predict future needs. But that'll be over the next few months, maybe a year. We'll have a better understanding of what that means. And they also do have a scenario component to that process, and we're excited about looking at that as we get into that in more detail. But yeah, I mean, I think an activity-based model is typically, I've heard, in the range of $1 million to set something up, and that's a little bit outside of our budget, but we're plugged in around the country and learning from other MPOs in terms of what best practices are. Hoping to over the next few years help lead that.
I can add a little bit here too, because we're behind Richmond in their process. So we've been talking with you all and talking with Hampton Roads and Fredericksburg and with the state folks. The state has a contract with a modeling company to do some accessibility planning, but that's proprietary to the state. So our ability to use that is limited. I know that's what Chet found his folks too. A lot of these wind up being GIS based, at least Fredericksburg and Hampton Roads. Chad, I don't know if Sula, but I'm still trying to understand completely how he did his. I know there was a lot of background work that he and Shin wound up doing to even create an accessibility tool of some fashion. The state had a tool before that based on the cube travel demand model. It was called Sugar. Then they're using a different model now, like I said, under contract with a company that's proprietary to them. $1 million? No, I don't think we have that in our budget yet to do something like that. Unless the state would like to buy that for us and just provide that service. That would be a really good, I think, Stuart, you're onto something, because I think we're all in that mode now. I mean, I will tell you, for our MPO, we're small. And what most of the needs that we're finding out that our community is looking for are those walk, bike, transit type needs. We don't have those big capacity needs, nor is there much desire to do that, except maybe like an I-95 or that type of thing. In fact, that's where it's steering into in our model. That's the only real capacity needs. And there's also the question, do you want to be widening every road anyway because of the community impacts? So I'm pretty excited if maybe, our state partners, some of them are on board, maybe they can take some of their millions that they get each year for planning and maybe just buy that tool for the use for the state and for MPOs to do that kind of planning, because I think there'd be a lot of benefit to all of us to do that. And like I said, it's already used right now for smart scale. Maybe we can expand its use and be able to all take advantage of that as we move forward with our performance-based planning processes. Because I think every MPO really wants to tap into that accessibility, particularly when it comes to community impacts, environmental justice, and those type of things.
That would be great, with record money coming from the feds, possibly, if this bill passes. Hopefully a lot of it, there'd be a lot more planning money too. And yeah, we're happy to back you guys up in talking to the state.
So for anyone who's just joining us tonight, this is the public involvement meeting for the Richmond MPO, as well as the Tri-Cities MPO. And feel free to unmute yourself if you have any comments you'd like to share with the MPOs and their planning processes. For those of you who are calling in, feel free to unmute yourself as well if you have any comments. And then for the folks who are joining us on YouTube live stream, feel free to mention you have any, share your comments in the chat window. And if you're viewing this at a later time, shared on the screen is the point of contacts where you can email your comments if you have any comments. And as well as folks here tonight too, if you have any comments that come to mind later on, feel free to share those comments with the MPOs via email. Chet, quick question, and also Ron, do you have ability for the public to share their comments if they go to your website, to your respective websites?
We don't have a form set up, but we could certainly do that following the meeting tonight.
I think we set up a form for our long range plan. We have a Facebook page too, that people, like I was sharing yesterday, we're finishing up our survey on the problems and needs, and we're still even continuing to get comments from folks on that on our Facebook page or in the groups that we've been involved in. And it sounds like we probably need to share some of that with you all as part of the 60-day period. And we'll want to, of course, announce that again on our webpage for people to submit comments between now and it's October 25th, I think it's like 30 days. So that way we can modify what we're doing on our homepage for the PDC, so people will see that right away. Actually, now that I think about it, I think it's just a sign up for being on a mailing list. I don't know if it's necessarily a comment. I'm gonna have to go back to the page and look at it. The person who created that page, Jay, that you all met yesterday, he's the one that helped us create all that. I'll take a look.
And also for the folks who are attending tonight too, feel free to share the YouTube recording too, if you have any, if you know anybody who might be interested in listening in. For those who joined us late, kind of later this evening, at the beginning, I gave a quick presentation on the TMA certification process and what it is and what it entails, and kind of gave example questions that the public could ask if they're not sure what to ask exactly.
Richard, I just looked back at our page and it's in our plan 2045, people can provide comments and thoughts, but that's about where we have it housed right now, not on our regular web page.
Okay, that's fine.
Because like I said, we're gonna encourage people to email me with comments anyway from the announcements right on the homepage, so they won't be able to miss it.
Thank you, Ron. And in the chat, I went ahead and shared the YouTube link to the Plan RVA page where the YouTube video will be is streaming right now, and where I assume where it will be left, or where the recording will be found after the fact. For anyone who's just joining us this evening, this is the public meeting for the Richmond MPO and Tri-Cities MPO TMA certification review. If you have any comments, please feel free to unmute yourselves on Zoom and share whatever comments you might have. You can also share your comments in the chat window for Zoom. And for those who are calling in, feel free to unmute your phone and share any comments you might have. And we also do have a YouTube live streaming right now. So if you have any comments, feel free to share your comments on the chat window there. And if you're viewing this at a later time, posted is or the point of contact emails for if you'd like to share your comments via email. For those of you who are just joining us this evening, this is the public comment period for the Richmond MPO and Tri-Cities MPO TMA certification review. If you have any comments, please feel free to unmute yourselves and share whatever comments you might have via voice, or you can also submit your comments in the chat window. If you're viewing this at a later time through YouTube live streaming, feel free to share your comments to the posted email addresses for the Richmond MPO and Tri-Cities MPO. So I think for this evening, I'd like to conclude the public meeting for the Richmond MPO and Tri-Cities MPO. I really appreciate and want to thank everybody who took the time out of their day to attend this public meeting. And also want to thank for everyone who's submitted their comments and shared their thoughts on the planning processes for both Richmond and Tri-Cities. Again, if for those who are viewing this video later on, feel free to share your comments. You have a 60-day window where you're more than welcome to share your comments to the MPOs, and then the MPOs will then share those comments with FTA and the Federal Highway Administration as well. Before I conclude, does anybody have any last comments or anything before we adjourn? Okay, so with that said, thank you everybody again, and hope everyone has a great evening, and